that's what I'm gonna do.
Hello, folks. My name is Kanuchi Taranella. I'm the Executive Director of Wenatchee River Institute. Welcome. Really excited about tonight. We've got a great panel of folks to talk to us, and a great crowd here tonight, and more people online. So it's exciting. If you don't know Wenatchee River Institute, our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world. We do that through youth programming, taking school kids to our campus, showing them nature, also taking our naturalist educators to their schools and their communities where we do similar ecological lessons, all the way down to Brewster, up and down this watershed. We also do adult programming that includes snowshoe walks and birding and events like this in the Red Barn. Try to make these Red Barn events free for our community. And we're only able to do that because we have supporters from sponsors and from folks who put money in that bucket over there. So thank you, you've done that. Another important part of, well, let me tell you a little bit more about Red Barn events. Next week, we've got two. One will be virtual on bird bones, which should be fascinating, and then ski movie as well by a local artist. Also a beekeeping workshop on April 1st. So that'll be fun. Another aspect of WRI is our effort to connect Indigenous peoples to their ancestral lands here. I'm going to take time right now for our land acknowledgement, especially pertinent to today's presentations. This land acknowledgement is created alongside the Shinpei people. We're spreading the message that they wish to be spread to the public. The land Wenatchee River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shinpei, the Squosa or Wenatchee people. The Shinpei, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River and surrounding areas. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Ridge throughout what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan valleys. The culture and economy of the Shinpei people centers on taking care of the land. They fish, hunt, gather roots and berries, basket-making materials, and medicines. The Shinpei are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Shinpei now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. They were forced off their land here, and the U.S. government moved them to this reservation. The Shinpei people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they're connected to. Their traditional language is Inham Sheen, an interior Salish dialect. And we would like to welcome you all by saying hello in their language, Tilhusht. We offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about the Indigenous people of the place you now call home. The Wenatchee River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. I'd also now like to thank our sponsors. It's because of our sponsors and donors that we can reach so many people in the Wenatchee Valley in such diverse ways. We've got Gustav's Grill and Beer Garden, Ludwig's German Restaurant, Obertal Inn, Posey Handpicked Goods, South Restaurants, Hotel Pension Anna, Munchen House, Sleeping Lady Resort, Mountain Resort, North Central Washington Audubon Society, Icicle Brewing Company, the Cove Resort at Fish Lake, Kolchak Consignment, Riverfront Rock Gym, Mountain Home Lodge, and Mitchell, Reed, and Schmitten Insurance. And now I'd like to introduce Mary Big Bull Lewis as the chair of the Indigenous Roots and Reparation Foundation. She is an enrolled member of the Colville Confederated Tribe, Wenatchee, Moses, and Intiat bands, and a descendant of the Blackfoot tribe. She was born and raised in the Wenatchee Valley and has continued to raise her family here. Mary is an Indigenous entrepreneur who owns 2 small businesses with her husband, Wenatchee Wear and Our Digital Design. She's worked in the legal field, medical field, and has found her purpose through her culture and art and entrepreneurship. Would you like to take it over?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll just go here. So I did this cool presentation and sent it last minute, but technical difficulties. So that's what you get for putting it together at the last minute, right? I also scheduled a board meeting today, an hour before I was supposed to be here. So, you know, what else can I do? So I just want to say, Lamb Lab, thank you for having the Indigenous Roots and Reparation Foundation here. I have a son. He is going to be 21 this year, which is kind of crazy. He is going to Central Washington University right now. He is going to be a commercial pilot. So something that I don't enjoy either is flying, but look at him go. And then, as I mentioned, my husband, he's here tonight, as always, helping me carry things and helping me do technical things. So Rob, if you want to raise your hand, here he is. He's a good guy. Yeah. So tonight we have several board members here. And I'll just kind of start out with how our organization began. So it actually began when we were launching our second business, Wenatchee Wear. And so through Wenatchee Wear, we wanted to create something unique. As I mentioned, I was born and raised in Wenatchee. There wasn't a lot of representation or acknowledgement that Native Americans were still here. We were kind of thought of just people as a past. So that was confusing me growing up in an assimilated and colonized setting. My mom was adopted when she was a baby, and my grandma was non-Native, and she had a lot to do with my upbringing. And then my dad is from the Blackfoot tribe, and they're survivors of residential schools. If you aren't familiar with that, there's a lot of good information that's written by Native American authors, survivors that are willing to share those experiences and traumas that I recommend that you read. And so growing up in Wenatchee, I felt like I was there, I had really good friends, but nobody that looked like me, nobody that understood Native American culture or honored those traditions and things. So it took into my adulthood to kind of figure out what I was missing, and that was my cultural connection. And so that's really when the time began of launching Wenatchee Wear, thinking of how can we make a clothing brand that's different, that's not just selling a t-shirt or a sticker, to have purpose. And so that was to share stories of my ancestors, of storytelling is a really important part of our culture. We learn so much from that. And I think it's something that's really lost in our modernized culture where we don't value that as much. So that is, and then also our art background. So my husband went to the Art Institute in Phoenix right after high school, and his passion's always been in art. And so pairing those with our love for the land and being outdoors hiking, that's where we find the most inspiration. And so that was really important to convey that through images, that it's not just a mountain, it's not just those rocks over there, but it's giving respect to what the land is. And one of our board members recently shared some videos that it's really funny how all of it's such a small world. So my uncle is part of the Pekinee, the Blackfoot Council up in Brockett, Alberta, Canada. They're working on a big project in Montana for buffalo restoration. And they shared these videos of, I'm like, that's my uncle. And another one of my friends had shared pictures because he's working with them. And it's like, how special is that to see those connections come through and the the work that we're doing is very similar, and it's important to work together to accomplish the same thing. We all want to be good stewards of their land, but we're not here to manage an ecosystem. We are part of the ecosystem, but it's up to us to take the responsibility to do what we can, and that's to be good stewards, to take care of the land and think of it as a living being, because that's what it is. A rock is not just a rock, it's not an object. We don't own a rock, we don't own the dirt, we don't own the trees. And so that was really cool to see those videos and just see that concept, you know, from different platforms being so vibrant, and the storytelling in that. So I just really appreciated that. But IRRF began through the need for a cultural center. We don't have a cultural center for Indigenous peoples to gather. There's not a place on our homelands that's, you know, Native owned, that's Indigenous led, that we can come to, that the understanding of cultural significance of beading or storytelling or educational pieces to educate the public. It doesn't exist. Doesn't mean it shouldn't. It means that we just have to make it happen. So I began reaching out to people and organizations and councils to discuss this idea, and wasn't getting anywhere. I'm not a very patient person. You can, I mean, don't ask my husband about that. He knows. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it myself. So I launched a GoFundMe, and within 5 months we raised $30,000. Like, whoa, what do we do with this? Like, and so then a local attorney reached out. He's our legal counsel, Steve Clem, offered to provide his legal services to help us form this nonprofit. And so I'm really grateful for that call. Well, actually, he emailed me on New Year's Eve of 2020. And that was like the best email that I could have gotten at that time. It was like, what a perfect timing. Like, let's start 2021 in a good way. And so I reached out to people, many of the board members that are still on our board, that I met through advocacy work, through wildfire recovery efforts that we were helping with the Colville fires on the reservation. And we had 12 board members within a couple of months. So there was no begging or pleading, please come join my board. They just said, let's do it. So we started with that and began thinking of, what do we want to be called? What is our mission? What is our logo going to look like? And I know a guy that can help us with that. So we said, hey, this is what we want. And just grateful for, again, all of his support and everything that he does with all my new ventures. I mean, I went back to school when I was 30, and he's like, okay. It's like, he's just like, you're going to do what you want to do, and it's all right. So he always backs me up. So I'm just really grateful for that. And then let's see. So we've done a lot of really great things. Our purpose is to, again, create this community center. We don't know where or what piece of land. We're not looking at land right now. We're really trying to get the word out about who we are and creating these relationships with other organizations and individuals that want to see this happen, because this is really important for our community to not only understand, but also to want to be a part of it. It's not just for one or two people, it's for our community. And so we've been spending time cultivating those relationships, and we're really grateful for everything that we've done. We've had some really great events that we've hosted, like Indian Hemp Gathering, which this is Indian hemp. So I have a lot of work to do if anybody wants to get this. And so this is for basket weaving, creating cordage. Oh, and look, I haven't done mine yet. I've gathered it, but it's a decoration in my shop right now. But we just hosted our second annual Indian Hemp Gathering. And so some of our programming is central to tribal members. because our goal is to bring them back here on the homelands. We need to create a welcoming space for them. We want to be here for them and to support them in different ways. So thinking about what are barriers why people aren't coming here, and making sure that we can help with that. So we leave some of our events open to tribal members only. We have basket weavers that come down and teach us how to gather properly and respectfully, as well as process it. And so we had our last one in November of 2022. And how many did we have? Like 30? 26? See, he knew. We had 26 people there, and it was a really good turnout. And the Wenatchee Valley Museum let us use their space to come in afterwards and eat lunch and just gather and process the Indian hemp. So that was really great. We hosted our first annual Huckleberry Camp. So it was a 3-day weekend, and we partnered with Base Camp Cascadia, which is just up Stevens Pass. And we invited tribal members, and within the first 20 hours, we had 80 people signed up. And we're like, whoa, I don't know if we can manage that many people for that whole weekend. It pared itself down organically, so we didn't have to tell anybody no, and we had people on a wait list. And we had about 40 people up there for the whole weekend. And we gathered donations from local produce farms. Safeway here gave food. The Colville Confederated Tribe donated salmon for our salmon bake. And there was a lot of donations that we got for that weekend. But we made sure that everybody had camping gear. We have extra camping gear. We don't want anybody to feel left out. We had families from across Washington State travel to be here. And the first night we had some storytelling, and I shared about IRRF. We had a gentleman share about his cancer, surviving cancer and what that means, and promoting cancer checks for men. And so that was really an inspirational speech that he gave. A second night, my Uncle Randy shared his video that he produced with the Center for Icicle Creek students that were learning about film, and it was called A Winter's Tale. How many of you have seen that one? Okay, quite a few. It's a great film. And so we shared that in the giant dome that's outside, and then Randy talked afterwards, and we had huckleberry ice cream or milkshakes. Yeah. So it was a really great weekend, and got a lot of great feedback about how important that was for them to be there with their families. We had kids that were, I think there was a baby that was there, maybe about 3 or 4 years old was the youngest. And so we had quite a range of ages up there, but everybody left the weekend with their native Costco baskets, because we had so much food left over that we told them to line up, and we put together boxes and said, here you go. And everybody left feeling healed and just in community with each other, and just how powerful that is. And so those are really the things that our board has found the most like inspiration and meaning of our organization, is these moments. And I don't want to talk all night because I got board members here that I want to share as well. So I'm going to let them come up. I'll introduce them. We got Rick here, which many of you know. He's one of our newest board members that joined in 2022. We have Paige here. She's one of the original founders of the organization. We have Randy Lewis, that many know. You want to come up? Jordan, do you want to come up? And we have Jordan that's here.
That's your season.
Both of you can come up.
All right,
Here.
my fat ass up here. Oh.
So I'll let Rick share about things about IRRF, things that so we just finished up our second annual strategic planning session as well with Summer Hess. She was really instrumental in helping us. This is her second year helping our organization plan. I couldn't have done it without her, and just really appreciative of all the help that she's given, because I've never ran a nonprofit. This is my first time. I've served on boards, but it's my first time doing this. And my husband asked me a couple weeks ago, he said, "Did you ever think that you would start a nonprofit?" I was like, "No, but I don't surprise myself." So, I do crazy things, but that's all right. So, so I'll let Rick kind of share about his experience and anything else.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Escobedo, and I live here in Leavenworth with my family. We're up the Chumpstick and caretakers of a nice, beautiful piece of property there. I'm also a board member here at Wenatchee River Institute. I see some familiar faces, community members that we like to see in town. Coming out of our strategic planning meeting here at the Sleeping Lady was really a wonderful experience, because I've done many boards, and it's the most diverse board that I've been on. And for those of you that have been on diverse committees, boards, it's always nice to see different flavors and the different backgrounds people come from. But we meshed really well on really the things that are important to us, our mission, and with no hesitation. So that was wonderful. I joined Earth because I had a calling to move back to this area for a few years. Right, and landed here, and I went to high school in Canada and moved away. Came back a couple times, but this last time I was just being called back and just been here. Beautiful area. And then I had this vision when I was at Stanford.
Yeah, we're not here.
Yeah, oh, that's right. There's people online. Yeah, I had this vision when I was at Stanford Hospital and Clinics working at the 45th annual powwow there. Really being exposed to that and seeing the Mexica dancers there come together and all tribes celebrating something beautiful. I said, wow, that would be nice to help and see that process happen somewhere where it's not happening. And then I met Mary, and she's doing this, right? Part of our mission is to bring all tribes together, right? And if you guys go back 3-4 generations back, and they're still calling families clans and tribes, but we've forgotten about that, right? So we're all Washingtonians here, and it's going to take everyone to help us really look at what needs to be done to take care of what's really sacred, right? Where we live. So part of our mission is to do to really look at things we can do with, and this word steward of the land it doesn't really resonate with me, but really looking at how we can be more responsible where we live and helping each other care for it. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Like Mary said, my name's Paige, and I live here in Leavenworth. My kids go to Cascade School District in Mountain Sprout, so I'm in this community. My family came to this valley in 1969 from Guam. My dad's Pacific Islander, indigenous to the Mariana Islands. And we came from our homeland to Mary and Randy's homeland. And with that, we brought aunties, uncles, cousins, grandmas, and great aunties and great uncles. And, there wasn't really a place for a big brown family to integrate into the valley other than being with each other and being a janitor at PD, working at the mill, working in the orchards. And so that's my family over the last several decades have come to, continue to connect with each other. And as my family, my dad was here for a few years, and then I grew up partially in Portland, but then we eventually made our way back here where my grandma has always been, and my 100 cousins and aunties and uncles. And I went to Kashmir High School. Also, actually, Rick's best friend was one of my cousins, so that was funny to find out. And as I kind of grew into myself and my culture and viewing my differences less as a hindrance in a kind of homogenous community and more of a place for growth and cultivation for myself, and now as a mother of two, that's where I found myself when I found myself learning my language and matching Chamorro words and with values that were already practiced. I just didn't know the names of them. That was just how I was, how we were together. And one of those values is Anafa Malek, which means returning to good, and kind of aligns with reciprocity. And as I was raising my kids, learning my language, this phrase and this value has really kind of guided how I want to be present here on the lands that I occupy. How would I want people to be on my homelands? And so Mary and I, we connected, I think like 4 years ago, and bonded over hiking and Spam, and it's really good. And we just had a friendship, but then I was just always, I felt doing my own work in a way that Mary and I could just be friends, and there wasn't like any sort of weird dynamic. But in terms of being a part of this effort, this was just so aligned with the values I was raised with that I now can say the words in my language. And I want to be certain that that's what I'm contributing to, and that's what my kids, what's normal to them. And so I grew up being in the kitchen with my grandma. I was in the kitchen at Huckleberry Camp, putting together native Costco. It was so fun. But this is where I find congruence between my family's Indigenous values and how to be in a respectful, in a good way on these lands. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here to speak, and also to continue just to support in any sort of way, with Rick and Jordan and others. It's really an honor. You hold it.
Wake up. No, you don't have to hold it. Why in our language we say why ulchast icha icha ayachan na oishn pascosa ne icha ayos na an tiat miat hawit. My name is Randy Lewis. I'm 500 generations Wenatchee. Naham Hachin, we speak Naham Hachin in Pascosa. On one side, on my grandfather, great grandfather, was Samuel Miller, the founder of the Miller Freer Trading Post in Wenatchee. He married my great grandmother, who was the niece or the daughter, I guess, depending on how you put it, of the salmon chief. in the lower Wenatchee area, Rock Island. Out and the foundation of our world was Rock Island. If you look at it from above and look down at Rock Island, it looks like a heart, looks like a human heart. And so we say that's the heart of our people. We came from here. We don't say we came from anywhere else. We say we came from here. We came from out of the darkness. We came from underground, from a hole in the ground, our stories. And before that, we were here, but we were not a people. We were just kind of roving bands of families. And through our creation stories, we tell about the days in which we became a people, in which the laws of the Creator were given to us, which takes you back to what came first, the laws or the people? The laws, because without the laws, there would be no people. We were just animals. So we've always viewed ourselves in respect to being a part of everything that is. My folks, my grandmother used to always say, walk in the way of your people. Always be in a good way with everything that is. When you take something, you dig a root, you pick up a rock, you thank it. You thank this world. You thank the spirit of that Tzachalosha, of that Ichwa, of that Stokum, our sacred foods. All the salmon people and the spirits. Everything that is alive around us. Whether you're rock, whether you're boy, whether you're beef, whether you're broccoli or bean sprout, you all have a spirit in you that the Creator imbued in all of us. And if you mistreat things, that spark diminishes in you. And we say you lost your shadow, you become soul dead. And you see people going out and doing things out in the world here, defiling, destroying. And my grandfather would just say, they lost their shadow. That's what's wrong with them. They've lost that connection. Well, going back, I wasn't born here. I was born up on the Colville Indian Reservation, a place called Ojai Lake Flats, above Nespelem. And my mother, she was like many young women, trying to strike it out on her own. My father was kind of, he was a mess. He was a cowboy, all his time in the rodeos. And my mother grew up on our ranch, which was at Aswell, which is up the Columbia River. How did we end up there from down here? Well, this great diaspora that threw us all out. We originated in the Wenatchee, in San Pascosa. We came from here, but as the pioneers, as the miners, as the fur trappers, as they all came in, they pushed us out. This is putting it mildly, there was a lot of heinous things that went on. And this territory, this area here is rife with the bloodshed of our people. Some of our people, they packed up and they left after the White River Massacre, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, up here at the headwaters of the Wenatchee. One of our bands was the people from that little village, that band, were wiped out. They were slaughtered. And the remainder, there were some that were up in there was a little lake up on the Cascade Crest where they would meet annually for trade with the Saxawatl and Snoqualmie people. So some of them were up there when this happened. Well, when they returned, they saw the aftermath of the devastation. And so many of them just went right back over with their friends, reconnected. And so some of our Naham speaking people, our Sinpascosa people, we ended up over in the Sauk-Suattle, Darrington, in that area. My great-grandmother, she married Sam Miller, and I always get a kick out of him. He said, upon marrying the salmon chief's daughter, he said, I thought myself the luckiest man in the world. I didn't realize she was the meanest one in the tribe. So there was a learning curve going on here. And she helped him with the trading post for a while, but she missed her people. She missed hearing Naham being spoken. Believe it or not, most of the people who came in here, they learned to speak Indian, but they were speaking Chinook jargon. There are about 450, 500 words in it, but it was the lingua franca of the period. It was the trade language. And so white people all spoke it. I mean, when you came into the area, you had to learn it to survive. And for the first few years, y'all were pitiful. We had to feed you. We had to teach you how to feed yourselves because, you know, Johnny Appleseed had not made it this far yet. And so my grandparents showed them where to get wild potatoes, where to get the chachalosha, the biscuit root, where to get spatlam, bitter roots. We fed you all here. And those practices, well, I'll tell you this, you know, through all of what we saw and what we witnessed and what we felt, I can say my family never became haters. We had a lot of reason to hate y'all. We had a lot of reason to bear some deep resentments, but we didn't see that as being able to continue on. So I never grew up around that. My granddad said, you know, Indian people, we say skint, which is all Indian people. We differ not so much culturally as we differ in the impact of white culture upon us. That's where we truly differ. Culturally, we all, you know, exhibit a lot of the same practices in our regards of the sacredness of this land. Wherever you're at, Indian people pretty much display the same love and affection for their homelands. And so I grew up in a household. My mother left Ojai Lake Flats, and my great-grandfather, Sam Miller II, my mom kind of just attached me. Here, go stay with your grandparents, your great-grandparents. So I stayed with them. And then they were very traditional in their practices. We went to Celilo Falls, which is on the Oregon-Washington border. It was the largest salmon fishery in the world at that time. And for the next few years, I lived at Celilo Falls, and my mom remarried, and my stepdad, and they all moved down there. And we had one of the fanciest shacks down there, fishing shacks, because they built it from scratch with good lumber. And so I grew up running up and down from the falls where my mom would be dip netting, fishing for salmon, for sturgeon, for eels, all of that. And I would, my aunt made me a bag that hung with a strap off my head down my back, and I would run fish up. They'd catch fish and I'd run it up, and the women folks would be filleting them out and hanging them to dry. And they would give me, you know, for hauling a big salmon, I'd get a nickel. Well, those nickels piled up during the day, and by the end of the day, I'd have $2 or $3 just running fish back and forth, or from the fishermen up. The trick is to remember which fish went to which people. You didn't want to mess that up. So, but I watched them, and I would watch as the tourists would be parked right above us there up on the highway. taking pictures of us fishing, taking pictures of our encampments. And hundreds of people, thousands of people, Indian people would gather there, carry on the ceremonies, the first salmon feast, the root feast, the berry feasts, the elk feast. We had feasts for everything. And I watched the Shoyapi, the white tourists would come down and they would buy some dried meat, dried fish from us, from my aunts. So I thought, So I went down and I brought back a bucket full of pike minnow, we call them squawfish, and suckers. And I brought them back up and I told the old ladies, show me how they did that. So they showed me and they were getting the biggest kick out of it. So I'm sitting there and I'm filleting all my fish. And they made a little rack about this high off the ground so I could go hang the fish like they did. I had a very respectful looking line of fish and another line and another line. And everybody would go by, they would laugh, they'd see me doing it. In between me running down, getting fish break. Well, fish dried really quick out there in the hot sun and against the cliffs. So come the weekend, I brought my buckets over there and I took my dried fish off and I put them in the buckets and I went up on the road and I started hawking them to the white tourists. 50 cents a side. I called them steelhead. I called them sockeye salmon, dried salmon. At the end of the day, I had like $7 or $8 in my pocket. What kid in 1954 had $8 there? Hell, my parents weren't even making that much. So I came back and I'm just flesh. So I repeated this and all of a sudden it started dawning on them. I was a real mercenary. Yeah. But see, it all started because my dad, who was a rodeo rider, he would dress me in cowboy boots, new Levi's, and white shirts. He always wanted me to look presentable. Well, as I outgrew my boot, I would need new boots. And my mom said, oh, can't. Those cost a lot of money. Your dad bought those for you. Well, I want boots. She said, well, if you want boots, you're going to have to buy your own boots and your own shirts and your. So I did. After that, I never went back. And that was my days at Celilo. But the lessons you learn as a child, this huge extended family system. Nobody now would allow their kids to be running around Celilo Falls, the entire Columbia, plunging over cataracts and cliffs. They would just, you'd be thought of as a negligent parent. Well, our parents just get out the door, go out there and go play by the falls. And I learned a lot, like how to prepare our eels, our salmon, all the different types of salmon, the different types of fish that came up. I watched with great pride as my mother dip netted salmon, because this was something that women didn't do, only men did. They didn't let women do it. And my mother broke tradition. She went down there and she fished. One day, the head of the longhouse, the salmon chief, Lowat, Tommy Thompson, he called everybody in the longhouse together and he brought me out and he stood me in the center of the longhouse. And he got up and he spoke about my mother, about how, you know this little one, you know him. He's the one selling squawfish to the Shoyapis up on the road. Well, we all know him. And you know his mother, she has been fishing and there's been bad talk, lots of bad talk from you people about her, he said. Well, anybody wants to come out and start feeding her family, her kids, come forward, come forward. You don't want her fishing, you come forward, you start taking care of her kids. Everybody. Nobody stepped forward. He said, okay, that's it. She fishes. My word is law on your chief. And when you see her on the trail, you smile. Oh, a couple of days later, mom come in and I was sitting there eating soup. She goes, I don't know what's happening. She said, everybody's smiling at me. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's tipping their hats and smiling and being really nice. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Because I didn't know, when you're a kid, you don't know the overt or what's going on. You're just a kid. Well, when Celilo was finally decommissioned because they built Dallas Dam. They came and they told us that we had to relocate out of there. And for those Wyamps and Wishkam people that were there, they were going to provide them with the village, Celilo Village, but they were going to move it between the cliffs and the railroad track. Well, our family wasn't from there, so we left. And we moved back up here to Wenatchee Heights, to my grandfather's home territory. Now, he had a ranch already up at Aswell, but it was this need to be where he came from, where the home was, where our culture was, that brought him back here. And so then I spent the next few years running around the cliffs and these great rock icons, I call them, you know, that you call, you know, Stemstemelt, Pashastin, the salmon at Pashastin Pinnacles, all the way up and down. I got to know these areas and the stories that went with them, because in my household, our household, we had my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my mom and dad, and us kids. We had a real extended family. And some of them, Lucy Nason, my great aunt, Nason Creek up here. Miller Street in Wenatchee, named after my great grandfather. We were at home. Somebody said, so where do your people say they came from? And we say, right here. And I had an ethnographer from University of Kansas. He looked at my granddad and he said, he had learned to speak Naham. And so he asked my granddad, he said, what did your people call this before white people came here? And he goes, ours. The answer is any, huh? He said, no, he said, where do your people come from? He said, and then he's smart, he put out his hand. Right, start talking to you, better put some money in my hand. So he had to wire back to the University of Kansas and get some money transferred. And then old man told him to make sure they're small bills. So he brought a whole pile of money, $800. Well, which to us was a lot of money. And he counted it out, turned his tape recorder on. He said, okay, he said, can you tell us, first of all, your name? Ashlachan. Ah, okay. We're in the home of Ashlachan. Well, let's just start from the beginning. Where do you say your people come from? And he goes, my granddad, he was like a mastermind. He sits there. And in the most perfect English, I think they say we come from China. Click. No, he was just pulling his leg. He didn't. Well, you see that sense of humor throughout my family. They're bad. But I would sit and I would listen to him record my grandfolks, my grandmother, my grandfather, my great grandfather, my mother. My mother was fluent. We're all fluent because everybody spoke Indian in the household. We didn't speak English. So all of these places you heard on a daily basis. We had relatives come in and they would talk about their, they would rehash their history. We didn't have radio or television. We didn't have electricity, so couldn't have any of that. So you didn't have these distractions all the time. So as a kid, everything you learned, it's like right now, every kid can tell you every commercial that's on television. Well, this was my television, all these stories. And so that kind of emblazoned itself on my brain. And so I would sit and I'd listen to them tell stories, and sometimes I would fill in because they weren't moving fast enough. They'd sit there and they'd be telling their story. So I would just jump in. And so the guy with the tape recorder, the linguist, the ethnographer, he started cross-referencing me. he would ask them to tell the story. Then he would come back to me and he'd say, okay, tell the story. So I'm on a lot of their tapes. And my mother completed her PhD in ethnography and linguistics at 83.
Wow.
She finished the dictionary, or Naham dictionary, which is the second to the largest Indian dictionary in the nation. This was part of her bucket list. The other part of her bucket list is she wanted to bring the face of the Wenatchee Indians back to Wenatchee since we had been driven out of here. She worked for Skookum Apple Sheds here. That we love that. You know, don't let anybody tell you that, you know, we never saw it offensive. My mother took great pride in working for them. And my granddad knew I was Squint Eye, the one that they used as the model. Skookum George, but they called him Squint Eye because he actually did have one eye that was squinty. That made him, he wasn't winking, he was squinting. And so we were here until 1960, and then we found out that Wells Dam was going to be built. And we had an orchard there, we had a ranch there, my granddad, and that's where my mother had grown up. So we returned back up there because we had to salvage. They used the rights of eminent domain to condemn and confiscate everything. It was illegal. Right now, they would never get away with that. But back then, we didn't have power. We didn't have rights. We could not sue the government. We had to go through the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Indian agent. Well, he's the MF who set it up. So we just got salvage rights from our apples. So we took every board from our house. We had this beautiful, big old, crazy old white man house, big old Victorian house with all the gingerbread and Piccadilly shit on top of it with the weather vane. Man, we just thought we were the Snitz Indians, you know, we just thought. But we tore it apart.
We're only here till 8.
Oh.
If we want to have questions. Just letting you know.
Your tour is ended.
Your tour is ended. For a brief moment, I don't want to interrupt him, but I know we're only here till 8, so, which is only 4 minutes. So questions, rapid.
Question.
Yeah, we can show that. So it's only 3 minutes, so right on time, right on time. So this promo video we were working with Aaron Joy Nash of Brave Space Media, as well as Derek Lemire. He's from War Pony Pictures, and he's a Colville Wenatchee tribal member. And so it's really important to have those connections and show, you know, tribal members and the work that they're doing. So this is one that we just completed last year. We're going to work on another one this spring, a little bit longer. But this is on our website as well. Wow, man.
Sure.
I didn't know. Watch out.
Next time, warn me.
Yeah.
Icons, whether it's the Two Bears or Saddle Rock, they all have stories.
I am currently the chair of the Indigenous Roots and Reparation Foundation, also known as IRRF. This journey kind of began 3 years ago, shortly after launching our second business, Wenatchee Wear. This was a way to give back to our community and find ways that we can build a better future for our next 7 generations. Our overall goal is to build a community center for all Indigenous peoples to gather, to welcome, you know, our relatives back here to enjoy the space, to learn these languages, cultural teachings, arts, stick games, things that maybe we're not introduced to because of colonization and assimilation. there's this misrepresentation that we are people of the past. And so I really want to have that representation here in the Valley.
We're doing a lot of outreach and we are creating opportunities for people to get back on the land. We just hosted a great Huckleberry camp where probably about 30 Colville descendants were camped out for a weekend, learning about their traditions, exploring lands that a lot of them had never been on before. And as we do that outreach, we're also building an infrastructure of IRRF. It's a grassroots effort to work on getting land back for Pasquosa people, but also to look at creating models for land back efforts for Indigenous peoples throughout the Colville Reservation and throughout the country. And I really feel that the more that we learn about these stories, the more clear it is what path is the right path to take to move forward. Really listen first and to ask the question of like, how can I help? What's needed? It's about building relationships.
It's very important to know where we stand in the Pasquosa ancestral lands. I think like events like the Salmon Bake and having Randy Lewis to be part of not only IRRF, but our community here is really getting to know each other on a personal level and really looking at what we can do together to support the folks that have been living here into these traditional lands or are just newly arrived, because it's really about inclusivity.
Storytelling is that we're part of a circle that we're missing pieces. And it's up to us to continue to tell these stories so that we can put this circle back together. This design that we're unveiling today is the ice design, and it shares the history of our ancestors, the Pasquosa, the Wenatchee, and the treaties that were not upheld, and kind of how that whole history had happened. So we're passionate about creating awareness and empowering Indigenous people.
All right, so if we have some questions, are we still good for a couple of questions
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
I think there might be some questions in the audience.
Yeah, we'll go back up.
Possibly online too.
Oh, no.
Any questions here?
Yeah, I have a question for Randy.
Oh.
So being someone who has, harvested fish and seen Slilo Falls and been in this area since before a lot of the dams were put in, I was wondering kind of, how you saw your culture change after those dams were put in, and now that a lot of the fish populations have decreased on the rivers, where you kind of see that going.
Yeah, it's been a real sad chronicle. You're witnessing what the Indians on the plains were seeing when the buffalo were disappearing. But at least there was some attempts here to save the salmon. And when I was growing up, when I was a kid, there were only 4 dams on the Columbia then. And there were still a lot of salmon. There were nowhere near the record salmon runs that they had at the turn of the century. The hundreds of millions of salmon that came up. And we saw them just disappear one right after another. And I guess it was that broke my great-grandparents' hearts to see that the staple of our culture was disappearing. And my granddad used to say, once the salmon are gone, we're gone. Billy Frank, I think, put it probably the most succinctly by saying, save the salmon and you'll save the people. Not just the Indians, the people. Because salmon they're a keystone species. You have this beautiful Icicle River. You got this beautiful Wenatchee River Valley. Just, it's verdant. But without the salmon, it wouldn't be here. because they're the ones who fertilized. They're the ones who created this watershed over the thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or since the glaciers. And so if you don't do anything, if you listen to our stories about Coyote bringing the salmon and how he had to break down the walls and he had to break down dams that the great giants had put into place there. Coyote did that. And the lesson to that story is not lost on today. Salmon and dams do not work together. And so unless you do something to change that, y'all are going to look like Douglas County.
I'm gonna go back to your organization and because I'm really curious, I'd like to know more. And I also just like, I don't know the mission statement. Would you mind giving us your full mission statement? And I think what I'm curious about is like, with your strategic planning, if there's like 3 main things that you would like to accomplish, just so I have a better sense of how I can support making that happen.
Yeah, definitely. So sorry, like I said, I had this presentation done, but so our mission statement is that the Indigenous Roots and Reparation Foundation is an Indigenous-led nonprofit established in 2021 to preserve history, culture, traditions, and language through education and advocacy. Paybacks. Our goal is to provide a space on ancestral homelands for members of all tribes to practice cultural traditions, ceremony, and fellowship. This space will also serve as a hub for tribal members displaced by wildfire. IRRF strives to build relationships within our community for the purpose of earth preservation, recognition of the intrinsic value of all species and ecosystems, ensuring clean water and air, and returning human activity to a balanced, sustainable level. So it's a lot wrapped up into this, but it's our goal is to live in reciprocity with land, to set examples or find partnerships that we can share with our community, because I think that's really important. And there's a lot of land back work that's being done across the US. Our goal is to partner with everybody. So that's been a huge goal through our strategic planning for last year and this year, is to continue those partnerships. I had a whole list of like the organizations that we are currently working with, like the Chelan Douglas Land Trust, Sustainable North Central Washington. There's a Nature Conservancy. We're doing work with the salmon recovery efforts. It's kind of weaving into our business and IRRF and everything. So there's a lot. And so really what we're trying to do is get the word out about the organization. Even if people can't donate monetarily, they can share it via social media to their friends and family. And we're looking for grants. Also, if you know anybody that's looking for a job, we got an opening. So we're really excited because we are a working board. We are looking to hire a director of development right now. So if you all know of anybody that's looking for a part-time position, the job listing is on our website and we welcome applicants. And those are kind of the main things that we're focusing on this year. Yeah. Any other?
If we do want to donate money, I understand that you have a couple of different funds and opportunities. So it sounds like there's some land back specific funds, and I wondered if you could talk a little more about that one.
Yeah.
In particular.
Yeah. Thank you for that great question. So we do have several ways to donate. They are on our website. One of the ways is through PayPal. There's a link on our website. And if you do donate that way, there's 2 different funds that you can donate to. One is general funds, which supports like our day-to-day costs. If we're doing an event, we will have a specific category for that. But Land Back is our main account that we want to grow, and that we're looking for donations for continuously. Because even after we say purchase land, there's still going to be a lot of costs associated with building a community center and keeping it maintained
And taxes.
and taxes.
One thing as far as with the land back donations, we have 11 more community members that give a donation every time they go climbing, you know, that they integrate this into their recreational practice. Brave Space Media, their land fee was a donation to IRRF. Because right now, like Mary said, we're building programming to support a community to come here to have welcoming space for all Indigenous peoples. So then when we have that space that we're working towards, we have a community to continue to grow there. So it's both of those things, but there are a lot of ways that, you know, people can support. And I think too, like our name, we wanted it to be a little provocative. And so kind of educating on what it means to be invested in reparative work as a guest on these lands.
Yeah, we've also had cabins and other places that rent out Airbnbs where they allocate part of those fees because they recognize they're on stolen land. And so they'll allocate part of those booking fees. Those are really great things that people just thought of on their own, which is really cool.
I just want to say I am so grateful for you educating us, and Randy, your stories always inspire us.
Told you so.
I really I want to apologize. I didn't realize that we were on a short leash here, but I had a stroke. I had a stroke. It didn't paralyze my mouth. So.
Did we have any questions online? Okay. Any other short questions?
I was wondering if there was any other kind of Indigenous community centers around the West is like drawing inspiration from.
Definitely. So which is one that he founded 53 years ago.
Yes.
Daybreak Indian Star.
Daybreak Star Indian Center in
Yeah.
Seattle, the United Indians of All Tribes Foundation.
Mhm.
We just started out with a dream, the same thing. We started out with a dream. It's kind of a suicidal mission. We invaded Fort Lawton when it was still being occupied by the military. They beat the shit out of us. But we won 20 acres of land to build our center. And if you ever make it out to Magnolia to our center, we got the $1 billion view. We look all the way north to Mount Baker, the San Juan Islands. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And every year, third weekend in July, we host a huge powwow, urban powwow, but it's huge. It draws Indians from all over the country. And we have a huge salmon bake in which we cook tons of salmon. And everyone is welcome. And it takes place the same time as the Bite of Seattle and others. It's a seafair event. So we'll draw anywhere from 20 to 40,000 people. We can always squeeze in another.
Yeah.
Yes, there is the Seattle Indian Center, the Seattle United Indians of All Tribes Foundation. There's Indian centers around. Spokane Indian Center, which is part of the Chini Coles Museum also. And here you can, if you come to the museums, our museums here are starting to really get their act together when it comes to, we're not dead. We're still here. We're more than bows and arrows. So ask.
Yeah. Anything else?
They got any cookies?
You guys got any
Last
cookies?
burning question? All right, well, I want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
So wonderful. Thank you very much for coming tonight. If you could help maybe stack our other chairs, that'd be great. We can get ready for